The mop slid across the marble floor. Each stroke a quiet rebellion against the jeers echoing through the gleaming lobby of Sterling Enterprises. Eli Carter, 28, kept his head down, his calloused hands gripping the handle as three voices sharp, privileged, and cruel cut through the air. "Hey, Fairy, miss a spot over there." One of them sneered, followed by laughter that stung worse than the winter wind outside. Eli didn't flinch. He'd heard worse in his 6 months cleaning this Manhattan high-rise, home to the elite Sterling family's corporate empire. But tonight, the taunts from Julian Sterling, Tessa Sterling, and their cousin Marcus felt heavier, like stones piling on his chest. They lounged near the glass elevators, their tailored suits and designer dresses screaming wealth, their eyes glinting with the kind of entitlement that made Eli's stomach churn. He was just a janitor to them, a nobody, a gay man they could mock without consequence. If only they knew the truth about the man they ridiculed, the son of someone who'd shaped their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. The clock above the reception desk ticked past 9 p.m. Eli's shift was nearly over, but the Sterlings lingered, their laughter a deliberate performance. Julian, the eldest at 30, tossed a crumpled coffee cup toward Eli's bucket, missing it by inches. "Oops," he said, smirking. "Guess you'll have to clean that up." 2. Tessa, 27, giggled, her diamond earrings catching the light. Marcus, the cousin, leaned against a pillar, scrolling his phone, occasionally glancing up to add a barbed comment. "Bet he loves this job," Marcus said. "All that time alone with his mop, too. Think." Eli's jaw tightened, but he kept mopping. He wasn't invisible. Not to himself. He was Eli Carter, son of Daniel Carter, a man whose courage had once changed lives like those of the three mocking him now. But Eli didn't know that yet. All he knew was the ache in his shoulders, the sting of their words, and the secret he carried, his love for Jamie, his boyfriend of 2 years, who waited for him at their tiny Brooklyn apartment. Jamie, with his warm smile and unwavering belief in Eli, was the reason he endured nights like this. The Sterlings didn't know about Jamie, but they'd seen the rainbow pin on Eli's backpack, left carelessly by his cleaning cart one night. That was enough for them to start their campaign of taunts. It began with snickers, then escalated to pointed jabs about his lifestyle, as Tessa once called it, her voice dripping with disdain. Eli never responded. He couldn't afford to. Losing this job meant losing the health insurance that covered Jamie's asthma treatments. So he swallowed the insults, let them slide off like water on glass, and focused on the rhythm of his work. Tonight, though, something felt different. Julian stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking on the floor Eli had just cleaned. "You're awfully quiet, Janitor," he said, his voice low and mocking. "What's the matter?" "Boyfriend troubles." The word boyfriend was laced with venom, and Eli's grip on the mop tightened. He wanted to snap back, to tell Julian to shove his arrogance somewhere dark. But he bit his tongue. He thought of Jamie's laugh, the way it filled their cramped apartment with light. He thought of his father, Daniel, who'd taught him to rise above cruelty with dignity. "Leave him alone, Julian," a voice interrupted, soft but firm. It was Sarah, the night receptionist, a kind woman in her 50s who'd always treated Eli like a person, not a punching bag. Julian rolled his eyes but backed off. muttering something to Tessa. The trio sauntered toward the elevators, their laughter fading as the doors closed. Sarah gave Eli a sympathetic look. "They're not worth it," she said quietly. Eli nodded, but his chest burned. "Not worth it? Maybe." But the Sterlings weren't just cruel, they were clueless. They didn't know that 20 years ago, Daniel Carter, Eli's father, had risked everything to save their lives. A fire had torn through a charity gala their parents hosted, a glittering event Daniel attended as a volunteer EMT. He'd pulled the Sterling siblings, then just kids, out of a smoke-filled hallway, his own lungs seared by the heat. He never spoke of it. Not to Eli. Not to anyone. Daniel was a quiet hero, the kind who didn't need applause. Now, years later, his son faced the mockery of the very people he'd saved. Eli didn't know this history yet. All he knew was the weight of his father's old EMT badge, tucked in his pocket, a keepsake he carried to feel close to the man who'd died 5 years ago. As he finished his shift and stepped into the biting New York night, he pulled his jacket tight and headed for the subway. The city's pulse thrummed around him, honking taxis, distant sirens, the chatter of late-night crowds. He thought of Jamie, waiting with a pot of coffee and a bad joke to make him smile. But the Sterling's words clung to him, a shadow he couldn't shake. At home, Jamie greeted him with a hug, his warmth melting the chill of the night. "Rough one?" Jamie asked, his hazel eyes searching Eli's face. Eli shrugged, not wanting to burden him. But Jamie knew. He always did. They sat on their worn couch, the TV flickering with a muted sitcom, and Eli let himself lean into Jamie's shoulder. "They're just rich idiots," Jamie said, his voice soft but fierce. "You're better than them." Eli wanted to believe it. But as he lay awake that night, Jamie's breathing steady beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. The Sterling's cruelty wasn't random, it was personal, even if they didn't know why. Tomorrow, he'd face them again. Tomorrow, he'd mop their floors, endure their taunts, and hold his head high. But tomorrow, something would shift. A truth, buried for decades, was about to surface, and it would change everything. The subway rattled beneath Eli's feet the next evening, carrying him back to Sterling Enterprises. His reflection in the grimy window looked tired, the faint bruise of sleeplessness under his eyes. Last night's taunts from Julian, Tessa, and Marcus replayed in his mind, each word a splinter he couldn't pull out. At the high-rise, the lobby gleamed under fluorescent lights, a sterile contrast to the chaos in Eli's head. He grabbed his cleaning cart, the familiar weight grounding him. Sarah waved from the reception desk, her smile a small anchor in the storm. But the Sterlings were already there, gathered near the glass doors, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Julian spotted Eli first. "Back for more, Janitor," he called, his voice carrying across the lobby. Tessa smirked, twirling a strand of her auburn hair. Marcus, as usual, scrolled his phone, but his lips curled in amusement. Eli pushed the cart forward, ignoring them. He focused on the floor, the rhythmic swish of the mop. But Julian wasn't done. He sauntered over, his expensive cologne stinging Eli's nose. "You know," Julian said, leaning close, "you don't belong here. This place is for winners, not people like you." The word people was a blade, slicing through Eli's calm. He thought of Jamie, of the way he'd kissed Eli's forehead that morning, whispering, "You're enough." It steadied him, but only just. Tessa joined in, her voice saccharine. Maybe he likes it here. All that scrubbing must be therapeutic. Her laugh was cold, and Marcus finally looked up, adding, "Bet he's got a thing for mops." The trio's laughter echoed, drawing curious glances from a passing security guard. Eli kept working, his hands steady, but inside, he was unraveling. He wanted to scream, to tell them they were nothing without their money, their name. But he couldn't. Not yet. As the night wore on, the Sterlings lingered, their presence a deliberate taunt. Eli moved to the executive floor, cleaning the boardroom where the Sterling family made their millions. The room was a shrine to their legacy photos of their parents, Charles and Evelyn Sterling, lined the walls, their faces stern and regal. Eli paused, studying a photo from a charity gala, the date stamped 20 years ago. Something about it tugged at him. A faint memory of his father mentioning a fire, a night that changed him. Eli shook it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. Back in the lobby, Sarah caught him during a break. "You okay, Eli?" she asked, her voice low. He nodded, but she pressed a cup of coffee into his hands. "You don't deserve their crap. None of it." Her kindness was a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the weight of the night. As Eli sipped the coffee, he noticed a faded newspaper clipping on the wall behind her desk, framed like a relic. It was about the gala fire, the one his father had mentioned. The headline read, "Hero EMT saves dozens at Sterling Gala Blaze." Eli's heart skipped. His father's name wasn't mentioned, but the date matched. He filed it away, a puzzle piece he didn't yet understand. The Sterlings returned, their voices louder now, fueled by wine from some upstairs event. Julian tossed a paper towel at Eli's feet. "Missed a spot," he said, grinning. Tessa laughed, but Marcus's eyes lingered on Eli, a flicker of something curiosity. Before he looked away, Eli bent to pick up the towel, his fingers brushing the EMT badge in his pocket. He felt his father's strength, his quiet courage. It kept him moving. At home, Jamie was waiting, his arms open. Eli sank into him, the day's weight spilling out in quiet words. Jamie listened, his hand rubbing circles on Eli's back. "They're not worth your pain," Jamie said, his voice fierce with love. "But you're stronger than they'll ever be." Eli nodded, but the newspaper clipping gnawed at him. He didn't tell Jamie about it, not yet. He needed to know more. The next night, Eli arrived at work early, driven by a need to dig deeper. He found Sarah at the desk and asked about the clipping. Her eyes softened. "That fire was big news," she said. "A lot of people owe their lives to that EMT. Nobody knows his name, though. He didn't stick around for the spotlight." Eli's pulse quickened. He knew his father's humility, his refusal to seek praise. Could it be? As he cleaned the lobby, the Sterlings arrived, their taunts sharper than ever. Julian mocked Eli's rainbow pin. Tessa made a crude joke about his boyfriend. And Marcus watched, his silence heavier than usual. But Eli's mind was elsewhere, piecing together fragments of a truth that felt impossibly close. His father had been at that gala. He'd saved lives. And the Sterlings, with their sneers and their wealth, might owe him everything. Eli's hands shook as he pushed the cleaning cart through the Sterling Enterprises lobby. The newspaper clipping's headline burned into his mind. His father, Daniel Carter, had been the unnamed EMT who saved dozens at the Sterling Gala fire. The realization was a spark, igniting questions he couldn't shake. Had the Sterlings been among those saved? Did their cruelty stem from ignorance of a debt they didn't know they owed? The lobby was quiet tonight, the Sterlings absent for once. Eli welcomed the silence, but it didn't ease the storm in his chest. He mopped the floor with mechanical precision, his thoughts racing. His father never spoke of the fire, only mentioning it once when Eli was a kid, his voice heavy with something unspoken. "Some nights change you," Daniel had said, his eyes distant. Eli hadn't understood then. Now, he was starting to. Sarah noticed his distraction during his break. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, sliding a chair over. Eli hesitated, then told her about the clipping, about his father's EMT work. Her eyes widened. "Daniel Carter. I remember that name. He was a legend among the first responders. Quiet guy. Never wanted credit." She paused, studying Eli. "You think he was the one in that fire?" "I don't know," Eli admitted, his voice tight. "But I need to find out." Sarah nodded, pointing him to the building's archive room, a dusty closet of old records and press clippings. "If there's anything about that night, it'll be there," she said. After his shift, Eli slipped into the archive room, his flashlight cutting through the dark. The air smelled of old paper and neglect. He sifted through yellowed files, his heart pounding. Finally, he found a folder labeled Sterling Gala Fire, 2005. Inside was a detailed report, 42 people saved, including 3 children of Charles and Evelyn Sterling. No names were listed for the kids, but the timeline fit. Julian, Tessa, and Marcus would have been young then, maybe 10, 7, and 8. The report praised an unnamed EMT who carried the children to safety through choking smoke, collapsing from exhaustion afterward. Eli's throat tightened. That was his father's way, selfless, silent. He tucked the report under his jacket and left, the weight of it heavier than the cleaning cart. At home, Jamie was up, sketching at their tiny kitchen table. He took one look at Eli's face and set his pencil down. "What's wrong?" he asked. Eli spilled everything: the clipping, the report, the possibility that the Sterlings owed his father their lives. Jamie's eyes blazed with anger. "They mock you while standing on your dad's sacrifice. That's disgusting." Eli nodded, but he felt more than anger. There was a strange ache, a need to understand why his father never told him, and why the Sterlings, if they were those children, had grown into such callous adults. Jamie pulled him close, his voice soft. "You'll figure it out. And I'm here, no matter what." The next night, the Sterlings were back, their taunts sharper than ever. Julian tossed a pen at Eli's cart, smirking. "Careful. Don't want to ruin your manicure." Tessa laughed, but Marcus's eyes lingered on Eli, a flicker of unease in his expression. Eli kept his head down, the report burning a hole in his pocket. He wanted to confront them, to shove the truth in their faces. But he needed more. He needed proof. During a quiet moment, He slipped back to the archive room. Digging deeper, he found a grainy photo from the gala, showing a smoke-filled room and a figure his father, unmistakable in his EMT gear, carrying two children. A third clung to his leg. The faces were blurry, but the ages matched. Eli's heart raced. It was them. It had to be. As he left the archive, Marcus was there, leaning against the wall. "What are you snooping for, Janitor?" he asked, his tone less mocking than curious. Eli froze, the photo hidden in his jacket. "Just cleaning," he lied, his voice steady. Marcus studied him, then shrugged and walked away. But his gaze lingered, like he sensed something was off. Eli's shifts blurred into a cycle of work and research. He found more clippings, piecing together the night of the fire. His father had been hailed as a hero, but he'd refused interviews, shunned the spotlight. Eli felt pride and pain in equal measure. Why had Daniel kept this from him? And how could the Sterlings, if they were those children, be so cruel? By the end of the week, Eli was exhausted but resolute. He had enough evidence to confront them, but he wasn't sure how. Jamie urged caution. "They're powerful, Eli. You need to be smart about this." But Eli couldn't let it go. The truth was a fire in his chest, and it was about to ignite. Eli's boots echoed in the empty Sterling Enterprises lobby, the silence amplifying the storm in his head. He'd spent days poring over the gala fire records. The grainy photo of his father burned into his memory. Daniel Carter, the hero who'd saved the Sterling heirs, was a secret even to his own son. Now, Eli carried that truth like a weapon he wasn't sure how to wield. The Sterlings arrived late that night, their laughter cutting through the quiet. Julian led the pack, his smirk sharp as ever. "Evening, Janitor," he called, tossing a crumpled napkin toward Eli's cart. Tessa giggled, her heels clicking as she followed. Marcus, though, hung back, his eyes darting to Eli with something new wariness. Eli's pulse quickened. Did Marcus suspect something? He gripped his mop, focusing on the floor, but the photo in his pocket felt like it might burn through the fabric. Work dragged, each taunt from the Sterlings a fresh cut. Julian mocked Eli's rainbow pin again, his voice loud enough for the security guard to glance over. Tessa chimed in with a cruel joke about cleaning up his act. But Marcus was quieter, his usual barbs absent. Eli caught him staring, not with malice, but with something unreadable. It unnerved him more than the insults. During his break, Eli slipped back to the archive room, driven by a need for more answers. He found a letter, buried in a file, from Charles Sterling to the fire department, thanking the unnamed EMT who saved his children. The words were formal but raw, describing a debt that could never be repaid. Eli's chest ached. His father had carried that debt in silence, letting it shape him without ever seeking recognition. Back in the lobby, Sarah caught his eye. "You're digging deep, aren't you?" she said softly. Eli nodded, showing her the letter. Her face softened. "Your dad was something special, Eli. But be careful. The Sterlings don't like their past stirred up." Her warning lingered as he returned to work, the letter tucked beside the photo. The Sterlings were still there, their presence a deliberate challenge. Julian leaned against the reception desk, his voice dripping with mockery. Bet you're dreaming of a promotion. Huh? From mop to what? Glitter duster. Tessa laughed. But Marcus's eyes flicked to Eli. Then away. Eli's hands shook, the weight of the truth pressing against his ribs. He wanted to confront them, to demand why they mocked the son of the man who'd saved them. But Sarah's warning echoed, "Be careful." At home, Jamie sensed the shift in Eli's mood. "You're carrying too much," he said, pulling Eli onto the couch. Eli showed him the letter, the photo, the proof of his father's heroism. Jamie's eyes widened, then narrowed with anger. "They don't deserve to breathe the same air as you," he said, his voice low. "But you can't just confront them. They'll crush you." Eli knew he was right, but the fire in his chest wouldn't let him back down. The next night, Eli brought the photo to work, tucked in his jacket. He didn't plan to show it not yet, but it felt like armor. The Sterlings were relentless, their taunts sharper, as if sensing his resolve. Julian tossed a coin at Eli's feet. "For your troubles," he sneered. Tessa laughed, but Marcus didn't. He watched Eli, his expression unreadable, almost troubled. Eli's breaking point came late in the shift. He was cleaning the boardroom when Marcus appeared in the doorway. Alone. "You're always here," Marcus said, his tone neutral. "Why do you put up with us?" Eli froze, his hand on the mop. It wasn't mockery, it was a question, laced with something like guilt. "I have to," Eli said, his voice steady. "Bills don't pay themselves." Marcus nodded, his eyes lingering on Eli's backpack, where the rainbow pin gleamed. For a moment, Eli thought he might say more, but Marcus turned and left. The encounter left Eli rattled. Marcus wasn't like the others, his cruelty felt forced, like a mask. But why? Eli's mind spun as he finished his shift, the photo and letter heavy in his pocket. He was close to something, a truth that could change everything. But he needed more than documents. He needed the Sterlings to face their past. At home, Jamie held him, their quiet apartment a refuge. "You're not alone in this," Jamie whispered. Eli nodded, but his resolve hardened. Tomorrow, he'd find a way to confront them, not with anger, but with the truth. His father's legacy deserved that. And so did he. Eli stood in the Sterling Enterprises lobby, the photo of his father tucked in his pocket like a talisman. The weight of Daniel Carter's heroism pressed against him, a silent demand for justice. He wasn't just cleaning floors anymore, was carrying a legacy, one the Sterlings mocked without knowing. The Heirs arrived early that night, their voices sharp and familiar. Julian led with a smirk, tossing a paper cup toward Eli's cart. "Keep it spotless, Janitor," he said, his tone laced with venom. Tessa laughed, her eyes glinting with cruel amusement. Marcus, though, lingered at the edge, his gaze flickering to Eli with something like unease. Eli noticed it again, that crack in Marcus's usual arrogance. It was small, but it was there. Eli mopped in silence, his mind racing. The photo, the letter, the newspaper clipping, they were pieces of a puzzle, but not enough to confront the Sterlings head-on. He needed something undeniable, something that would force them to see the truth. Sarah's warning echoed, "Be careful," but careful wasn't enough anymore. He needed to act. During a break, he slipped back to the archive room, his flashlight sweeping over dusty files. He found a journal, a handwritten log from a fire captain who'd worked the gala blaze. One entry stood out. EMT Daniel Carter carried 3 kids out of the Sterling fire. Refused commendation. Said the kids' faces scared but alive were enough. Eli's breath caught. The kids were named Julian, Tessa, Marcus. It was them. His father had saved them, and they'd grown into the people mocking his son. Eli tucked the journal under his jacket, his heart pounding. This was the proof he needed. But how to use it? A public confrontation could cost him his job, his stability. Jamie's asthma meds depended on this paycheck. Yet the fire in Eli's chest burned hotter than fear. He thought of his father, of the quiet strength that had carried 3 children through smoke and flame. He couldn't let that sacrifice stay buried. Back in the lobby, the Sterlings were still there, their taunts relentless. Julian mocked Eli's rainbow pin, his voice loud enough to turn heads. What's it like, living like that? He sneered. Tessa giggled, but Marcus's face tightened, his eyes avoiding Eli's. Eli's hands shook, the journal's weight grounding him. He wanted to shove it in their faces, to make them read his father's name. But he held back, his father's dignity guiding him. Sarah caught him as he clocked out. You found something, didn't you? She asked, her voice low. Eli nodded, showing her the journal entry. Her eyes softened, then hardened with resolve. You're braver than most, Eli. But don't do anything rash. They're not just cruelty powerful. Eli thanked her, but his mind was set. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he needed them to know. At home, Jamie was waiting, his sketchpad open to a drawing of Ellie, a quiet, resolute figure against a city skyline. You're carrying too much, Jamie said, pulling him close. Eli showed him the journal, the final piece of the truth. Jamie's eyes blazed. They don't deserve your dad's sacrifice. But you can't just confront them. They'll twist it, make you the villain. Eli knew he was right, but the need to act was overwhelming. The next night, Eli brought the journal to work, tucked beside the photo and letter. The Sterlings were there, their taunts sharper, as if sensing a shift. Julian tossed a coin at Eli's feet, laughing. For your pride parade, he said. Tessa smirked, but Marcus didn't laugh. He watched Eli, his expression troubled, almost haunted. Eli met his gaze, and for a moment, the lobby felt charged, like the air before a storm. Eli's chance came late in the shift. He was cleaning the boardroom when Marcus appeared again, alone. You're not like the others, Marcus said, his voice low. Why do you stay? Eli's heart raced. He could have lied, brushed it off. Instead, he pulled out the journal, his hand steady. Read this, he said, opening to the entry about the fire. Marcus's eyes widened, his face paling as he read his own name, his siblings, and Daniel Carter's. You're his son, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. Eli nodded, the truth a bridge between them. For the first time, Marcus looked at him not as a janitor, but as a man with a story, one that changed everything. The boardroom was silent. The journal opened between Eli and Marcus, its pages a quiet indictment. Marcus's face was pale, his usual arrogance gone, replaced by something raw shock, maybe guilt. Eli stood firm, his father's legacy in his hands. But his heart pounded. He'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. "You're his son," Marcus repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at Eli. Really looked at him. For the first time. "The EMT. He saved us." "Me. Julian. Tessa." Eli nodded, his throat tight. The photo. The letter. The journal, they were no longer just evidence. They were a bridge to a truth Marcus couldn't ignore. "Why didn't you say anything?" Marcus asked, his eyes searching Eli's face. Eli's voice was steady, but it carried years of pain. "Would you have listened? You. Julian. Tessavi, you've been mocking me for months. My life. My love. My existence." He gestured to the rainbow pin on his backpack, now a symbol of defiance. Marcus flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I didn't know about your dad." The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Eli wanted to ask why they'd chosen cruelty, why they targeted him. But Marcus's expression, raw and unguarded, held him back. "I need to talk to them," Marcus said, his voice firm now. "Julian and Tessa, they need to know." Eli hesitated. He'd dreamed of confronting them. But now, with Marcus's eyes on him, it felt bigger, riskier. Back in the lobby, Julian and Tessa were waiting, their laughter echoing as Eli pushed his card out. "What's this?" "A secret meeting," Julian called, spotting Marcus behind Eli. His smirk faltered when he saw Marcus's face. "What's wrong with you?" Tessa asked, her tone sharp. Marcus held up the journal, his hands trembling. "Read this," he said, thrusting it toward them. "Now." Julian scoffed, but took the journal, Tessa peering over his shoulder. Their faces changed as they read. Julian's smirk faded. Tessa's eyes widened. "This is about the fire," Julian said, his voice flat. "So what?" Marcus pointed to Daniel Carter's name. "He saved us. All three of us." "And this," he gestured to Eli, who stood silently, his mop still. "This is his son." The lobby felt like it held its breath. Julian's face hardened, but Tessa's expression cracked, a flicker of shame crossing her features. "You're lying," Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Eli stepped forward, pulling the photo and letter from his pocket. "My father carried you out of that fire," he said, his voice low but unshakable. "He risked his life for you. And you've spent months mocking me for who I am." Tessa's hand went to her mouth, her eyes darting to the photo. Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Marcus broke the silence. "We didn't know," he said, his voice thick. "We were kids. Nobody told us." Eli met his gaze, seeing something new: regret, maybe even remorse. But Julian's silence was cold, and Tessa's eyes were wet, conflicted. Eli left them with the journal, the photo, the truth. He finished his shift in a daze, the weight of the confrontation heavy but liberating. At home, Jamie was waiting, his arms a refuge. Eli told him everything, his voice breaking as he described Marcus's reaction, Julian's defiance, Tessa's shame. Jamie held him tighter. "You did it," he whispered. "You honored your dad." But it wasn't over. The next night, the Sterlings were different. Julian avoided Eli's gaze, his usual taunts absent. Tessa seemed quieter, her laughter forced. Marcus, though, approached Eli during a break. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "For all of it. I didn't know who you were." Eli nodded, but the apology felt incomplete. Sorry didn't erase months of cruelty. Over the next few days, Eli noticed a shift. Julian and Tessa stopped mocking him, their silence a fragile truce. Marcus, though, kept seeking him out, asking about Daniel, about the fire. Eli shared what he knew, each conversation peeling back layers of Marcus's guarded exterior. He learned Marcus had struggled with his own identity, hiding parts of himself to fit the Sterling mold. It didn't excuse his actions, but it made him human. Eli's heart was still heavy, but the truth had changed something. He wasn't invisible anymore. His father's sacrifice had a voice, and it was his. But as he looked at the Sterlings, he wondered if their shame would last or if their privilege would bury the truth again. Eli pushed his cleaning cart through the Sterling Enterprises lobby, the silence between him and the Sterlings louder than their taunts ever were. Since the confrontation, Julian and Tessa avoided him, their eyes skittering away like they couldn't bear to face him. Marcus, though, was different. His apologies, his questions about Daniel, felt like steps toward something real. But Eli wasn't sure he could trust it. The journal, photo, and letter stayed in Eli's pocket, a reminder of his father's sacrifice and his own courage. He'd laid the truth bare, but it hadn't erased the months of cruelty. Julian's cold silence, Tessa's forced politeness, they weren't redemption. They were guilt, and Eli didn't know if it would last. Marcus, though, kept seeking him out, his conversations hesitant but earnest. Last night, he'd admitted, "I was awful to you. I didn't know how to stop." Eli had nodded, unsure if forgiveness was possible. Tonight, the lobby was quiet, the Sterlings absent. Sarah caught Eli during his break, her eyes warm but worried. "You shook them up," she said. "But be careful. People like them don't like being exposed." Eli nodded, her warning echoing Jamie's. He thought of his boyfriend, waiting at home, his unwavering support a lifeline. Jamie had urged him to let the truth settle, to focus on their future. But Eli couldn't let go it yet. He slipped into the archive room, driven by a need to understand his father's silence. Why had Daniel never spoken of the fire, of the lives he'd saved? Eli found another file, a personal note from Daniel to the fire captain, written days after the gala. "I don't want their thanks," it read. "I just want them to live well." Eli's eyes stung. His father had saved the Sterlings, not for glory, but for their potential they'd squandered with cruelty. Back in the lobby, Marcus was waiting, alone. "I found something," he said, holding a small box. Inside was a medal, tarnished but intact, awarded to an unnamed EMT for the gala fire. "My dad kept it," Marcus said, his voice low. "He said it belonged to the man who saved us." I think it's your dad's." Eli took the medal, his fingers tracing its edges. It was Daniel's. No question. The weight of it grounded him, but it also hurt. His father had given everything, and the Sterlings had given nothing back. I'm trying to change, Marcus said, his eyes meeting Eli's. I know it's not enough, but I'm trying. Eli wanted to believe him, but the pain of months of mockery lingered. It's a start, he said finally, his voice steady. Marcus nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The next night, Julian and Tessa were back, their silence heavy. Eli cleaned the boardroom, the medal now in his pocket beside the photo. Tessa approached him, her voice hesitant. I didn't know, she said, her eyes wet. About your dad. I'm sorry. Eli studied her, seeing genuine shame. But Julian, standing nearby, said nothing, his face a mask. Eli didn't push. He'd given them the truth. What they did with it was their choice. At home, Jamie held him, the medal between them. Your dad would be proud, Jamie said, his voice soft. Eli nodded, but his heart was heavy. The Sterling's apologies. Marcus's change, they were steps, but not closure. He thought of his father's note, live well. The Sterlings hadn't, but Eli could. He and Jamie could. The next shift, Eli wore the metal pin to his jacket, a quiet tribute. Julian noticed it, his eyes narrowing, but he said nothing. Tessa offered a small nod, a gesture of respect. Marcus lingered after the others left, his voice low. I'm coming out, he said suddenly. To my family. I've been hiding who I am. You gave me the courage. Eli's breath caught. Marcus's confession was a crack in the Sterling armor, a sign that change was possible. Eli left work that night feeling lighter. The truth had shifted something, not just in the Sterlings, but in him. His father's legacy wasn't just a story of sacrifice, it was a call to live bravely, authentically. As he walked to the subway, the city's pulse around him, he knew he was doing just that. Eli stood in the Sterling Enterprises lobby, the metal pin to his jacket glinting under the lights. It was more than a keepsake, no, it was a declaration. A piece of his father's legacy that demanded respect. The Sterlings hadn't mocked him since the confrontation, but their silence wasn't peace. It was a fragile pause, and Eli wasn't sure it would hold. Marcus's confession the previous night lingered in Eli's mind. Coming out to his family, to the Sterlings, was no small thing. Eli had seen the fear in Marcus's eyes, the weight of a secret he'd buried under years of cruelty. It didn't erase the pain he'd caused, but it humanized him. Eli wondered if Julian and Tessa would follow, or if their guilt would fade under the weight of their privilege. Tonight, the heirs were in the boardroom, their voices muffled through the glass doors. Eli cleaned the lobby, his mop moving in steady arcs. But his thoughts were on his father's note, live well. Daniel Carter had saved lives. Not for thanks, but for the hope that those lives would mean something. Eli glanced at the rainbow pin on his backpack, a symbol of his own fight to live well, to love Jamie openly despite the world's cruelty. Sarah caught him during his break, her smile warm. You've changed things, Eli, she said. They're not the same since you showed them the truth. Eli shrugged, unsure. Change was slow, and the Sterlings were steeped in power. But Sarah's words stayed with him as he returned to work, the metal a quiet strength against his chest. The boardroom doors opened, and the Sterlings emerged. Julian's face was tight, his usual smirk gone. Tessa's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Marcus walked behind them, his expression resolute. He caught Eli's gaze and nodded, a small gesture that carried weight. Eli nodded back, unsure what it meant but feeling the shift. Later, Marcus found him in the hallway, alone. "I told them," he said, his voice steady but raw. "About me. About who I am." He paused, his eyes searching Eli's. "Julian didn't take it well." "Tessa, she's trying." Eli's heart softened, but only slightly. "That's brave," he said, "but it doesn't undo what you did." Marcus nodded, his face open, vulnerable. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just a chance to be better." Eli didn't respond, but he felt the weight of Marcus's words. They weren't empty, they were a start. As Marcus walked away, Eli thought of Jamie, of the life they were building despite the world's sharp edges. He thought of his father, whose sacrifice had rippled through time, touching lives in ways even Daniel couldn't have foreseen. The next night, Tessa approached Eli in the lobby, her voice soft. "I want to make this right," she said, holding out a check. "For you. For your dad's memory." Eli stared at it, his stomach twisting. Money was their language, not his. "Keep it," he said, his voice firm. "Honor him by being better." Tessa's face fell, but she nodded, tucking the check away. Julian, watching from a distance, said nothing, his silence louder than any insult. Eli's final shift that week was quiet. The Sterling's absent. He cleaned the lobby with care, the metal gleaming, the rainbow pin bright. Sarah hugged him as he clocked out. "You're your father's son," she said, her voice thick. Eli smiled, the words a gift. At home, Jamie was waiting, a sketch of their future taped to the Phrygia house. A garden, a life. Eli pulled him close, the weight of the past lifting. The Sterling's cruelty had shaped him, but so had his father's courage. Jamie's love. He thought of Marcus's confession, Tessa's attempt at amends, even Julian's silence. They were flawed, human, capable of change. And so was he. As Eli lay beside Jamie that night, the city humming outside, he felt his father's presence not in the metal, but in the strength to live authentically, to love fiercely, to forgive slowly. The Sterlings might never fully repay their debt, but Eli didn't need them to. He was Daniel Carter's son, and that was enough. He'd live well not for them, but for himself, for Jamie, for the man who'd saved lives and asked for nothing in return.